The Devil May Cry series features a lot of cool swords, and each main character has their own unique style of wielding them. However, Dante possesses multiple double-edged greatswords that resemble one another, and it can get a bit difficult to distinguish them from each other and follow them through the story. Some swords transform into other swords, some of them get passed on to other characters, some gets broken, and some swords having a secret, unique power. In this video, I would like to take a closer look at the swords in all 5 DMC games because each of them tells a story that helps us better understand the amazing characters who wields them. However, I'm not going to list up literally every sword and every weapon in the game. I'm going to focus on the main swords of the main characters, which are the Rebellion, the Force Edge, the Devil Sword Sparda, the Devil Sword Dante, Alastor, the Yamato, and the Red Queen.
I always wondered, why did my father give me the rebellion?
If we go in timeline order, the first sword Dante ever had is the Rebellion. The name Rebellion suggests Dante's demon father, the legendary Dark Knight Sparda's rebellion against his own kind in order to save humanity.
Long ago, in ancient times, a demon rebelled against his own kind for the sake of the human race.
Rebellion, power of revenge. Dad really was pretty grim.
However, we don't really see or hear about Sparda actually wielding the rebellion in the game, except on one statue that depicts him with the rebellion in his hand. Visually, the Rebellion has the coolest design out of the great swords in my opinion. It has quite a unique shape of the blade that widens out at the end and turns into a kind of arrow shape. It is also easily recognized by the skeleton decoration at its hilt. If you look closer, this decoration consists of a ribcage and a human skull on both sides. The design of this skull changes a little bit through the series. When it first appears on the timeline in Devil May Cry 3, it starts off with a so-called unawakened state to parallel young Dante's unawakened demon side. In this slumbering state, the skull on the sword appears to have a closed mouth and the hilt is facing down, while after beating Mission 7, Virgil stabs Dante with both the Yamato and then with the Rebellion. In that moment, Dante's blood awakens the sword's true form and the skull's mouth opens up and its hilt is facing up. However, the Rebellion first appeared in DMC2, so originally it looked more detailed in the CGI art, but less detailed in the actual game. And after the third game, the sword's design actually changes a little bit in DMC4. The sword looks pretty much the same, except the skull on the side having a screaming open mouth, while on the other side it has its mouth shut.
What's the point of packing a sword like that if you aren't even gonna use it?
Then, the design further evolves in DMC5, this time not only having more details on them, but also the horns that were previously on the head of the skull, this time changes to come out from the eye sockets, giving us the impression that the Rebellion, as well as Dante, having one side which is an awakened demon, while still having a human side. And if you look closer on the skulls on the sword, you can notice a spiral symbol on their forehead. I personally interpret this as a twin snake motif that can also be observed on Virgil's coat with a similar spiral shape on it. Virgil also has twin snakes on his coat buttons if you look even closer. Although this is not confirmed by anything, I'm just guessing these perhaps representing 2 serpents. The Rebellion came to existence when Sparda split his power into 3 parts. According to a document in DMC5 called The Legend of Sparda, this is the origin of the 3 swords. The Dark Knight Sparda split his power in 3 parts. On one blade bore his own name, the second blade was named to embody retaliation, the final blade was named to embody a god of death. So these 3 swords were the Sparda, the Rebellion, and the Yamato. Then, before Sparda disappeared, he gifted the Rebellion to the child Dante and the Yamato to Virgil. So even though the Rebellion first appears in DMC2, story-wise, it first appears in the prequel, DMC3. It became young Dante's iconic sword and his weapon besides his guns when he starts his journey into the Temani group. In DMC3's library, the sword being described as a keepsake sword from Dante's father. This magic blade's true power hasn't fully awakened. However, after Mission 7 when the sword awakens, the last line of this library description changes to Dante's blood has awakened the blade's true power. This part refers to the moment when Dante got stabbed in the chest with the Rebellion by Virgil.
The demonic power was activated in me once, when Virgil lovingly jammed this through my chest.
And as the blade awakened, Dante's demon side also awakened, and from that point he became capable of tapping into his devil form, which is game mechanic-wise called the Devil Trigger. Then, the sword does not appear in DMC1 with the now grown-up and professional Dante, however, it makes its official first appearance in DMC2, being the first and main sword of Dante. Its library description says, Rebellion, standard sword for Dante. And yep, that's it. It has no lore, it's just being a standard basic sword. I know you can collect other swords in DMC2, but let's just focus on the main swords. Moving on to DMC4, Dante still wields the Rebellion as his main weapon, starting with the first cutscene where he meets Nero for the first time and immediately starts fighting each other. The Rebellion doesn't get any change in this game and doesn't really play a big role. Its library description says, a memento given to Dante by his father. This large magical blade is the physical manifestation of Dante's power. Then finally, the Rebellion meets its end at the beginning of Devil May Cry 5, when Urizen demonstrates his power by not only defeating Dante, but also shattering the Rebellion into pieces. A month later, V manages to find the Devil Sword Sparda and Dante lying unconscious nearby in a ditch. After V gently awakens him, this time literally, Dante switches to using the Sparda as he continues to fight. However, instead of going straight back to Urizen, Dante is wiser than that. Instead, he first stops at his own destroyed childhood family home. Okay, maybe he wasn't planning it, but accidentally coming across, which is miraculously still standing. Inside there, he looks up at the painting of his family portrait and starts contemplating about the Rebellion.
I always wondered, why did my father give me the rebellion? Over the years, I've been stabbed and jabbed by a number of things. But who would have ever guessed?
Have you lost your mind?
If the Yamato can separate man from devil, then what about the rebellion?
Wow. You are absorbing the Sparda!
Dante guesses that similarly to the Yamato, the Rebellion also has a hidden power that should be the opposite of dividing human from demon, and instead uniting them. And he's proven to be right because upon stabbing himself with the broken piece of the Rebellion, the sword also absorbs the Sparda as well, and not only awakens the ultimate form of Dante, his Sin Devil Trigger, but the Rebellion, together with the Devil Sword Sparda, also turns into a new sword, the Devil Sword Dante. So again, there is two important things that happens during this moment. Dante unlocks his Sin Devil Trigger, and the Rebellion absorbs and merges together with the Sparda, and it turns into Devil Sword Dante. Another way of interpreting what happens here is that the Rebellion's hidden power is to do the opposite of the dividing force of the Yamato, and instead unite man and the devil, meaning it combines Dante, a half-human, with the Devil Sword Sparda hanging from his back. So it could be also interpreted as the Rebellion actually helping Dante to absorb his father's sword in order to unlock his Sin Devil Trigger. And even though story-wise the Rebellion and the Sparda doesn't exist anymore, gameplay-wise you can still choose to use both swords in your loadout after you beat the game for the first time. This can lead to a little bit of confusion, and this is an example where you have to distinguish the story from gameplay. So canonically the Rebellion is no more, but you can still play the entire game with it if you choose to. But now you may ask, now hold on a minute, if Dante got stabbed with the Rebellion twice before, by Virgil and Nero, Then how come now it awakens his sin devil trigger? Well, my guess is because this time he turns the blade against himself. So similarly to how Virgil stabs himself with the Yamato to divide man from devil, Dante also has to do the same in order to use the sword's hidden special power. Because in the Yamato's case as well, even when Nero stabs Virgil back with his own sword, it's not going to divide him again, and instead, in the case of both the Rebellion and the Yamato, it only works if one pierces themselves through with it. But that's just my guess, not even the libraries state how it works exactly. But from that on, Dante uses the self-stabbing even during gameplay, but this time using the Devil Sword Dante in order to help him transition into his Sin Devil trigger form. Although if you get a triple S rank and then try to activate SDT, then the game skips the self-stab animation and Dante can instantly activate his ultimate form. Yeah, I'm not sure how getting smoking sexy style ties into the demon lore, but it seems like it allows Dante to activate his SDT even without the sword. And finally, we have the library description of the rebellion, this time written from the perspective of Nico, who is writing as if she was talking to Nero and giving him advice about enemies and weapons.
Ooh-wee! I'm gonna make something amazing out of this.
Did you just sniff that?
She writes, "The sword left to Dante by his legendary demon daddy, the Dark Knight Sparda. I've been slacking off on my Devil Sword studies, so I can't say much, but it ain't no normal weapon, that's for sure. I mean, that Yamato sword you had ganked from you has the power to separate man from demon, right? I bet this sword has some crazy powers of its own too. But as things stand, I can't quite figure out what they might be. So obviously the game doesn't want to spoil what's gonna happen, so Nico doesn't know yet here. But now we know that its crazy power is awakening Dante's Sin Devil trigger and turning into the Devil Sword Dante together with the Sparda. The next sword on the timeline is the Force Edge, this time wielded by both Dante and Virgil through the series. This is probably the most precious and important sword in Devil May Cry, since this is the very first sword Dante fights with in the very beginning of the first game. I'm not sure what the name Force Edge implies, but I'm guessing it's trying to hint at being only the edge of the original version, Sparda's sword, and the Force part simply refers to the sword having his power inside it. Visually, the Force Edge looks like a simple sword, except it's huge. It has a long, quite sharp-looking blade. Its hilt is spiral-shaped and features little skulls at the end. The handguard is the most unique feature of the sword, resembling to small demon wings. Upon closer look, I can even see some sort of a triangle-shaped symbol in the middle. This triangle shape kinda turns into a bull head in DMC3, then in DMC4 we can see a quite detailed version of it, and the symbol in the middle becomes a simple upside down triangle. Then in DMC5 we can only see a mirage version of it, so the sword has the same shape, but it's just an empty blue spirit version of it. The Force Edge first appears in the story at the end of Devil May Cry 3. The sword is actually being the sort of unawakened version of the Devil Sword Sparda, or perhaps simply being sort of a human version of it. Back 2000 years ago, Sparda used his sword as a key to seal the Tamanni Group, which is a giant tunnel between the human world and the demon world, or in other words, to seal a giant portal between the two worlds, which can only be accessed through the tower. And since the sword has Sparda's powers sealed inside, both Arkham and Virgil seeks to get their hands on it, and they manage to do so at the end of DMC3. It's Arkham who manages to get to it first and pull the sword out of the seal, but he is unable to control the power of Sparda and turns into a monster. After defeating him, the sword and the two amulets falls out of him, and Virgil manages to get to it first. However, even though Virgil uses Sparda's powerful sword, Dante defeats him and he drops it. And I'm not going to talk about this scene any further because it always makes me emotional, but the most important thing is, this is how the sword gets into Dante's hands. although in DMC3 it's only Virgil who wields the Force Edge, being his third weapon that he uses in combination with the Yamato when you play as him. In DMC4 and 5, Virgil's playable version also still uses the Force Edge, and I emphasize the words playable version because story-wise Virgil only got the sword in his possession during his last battle with Dante at the end of DMC3. And finally, the Force Edge's library description of DMC3 says, a sword magically imbued with Sparda's power, a powerful sword with great hidden potential. The story of the Force Edge comes to an end in the first DMC game. Now it's being Dante's main weapon. Presumably he switches to using it instead of using the Rebellion. He carries the sword to Melee Island to confront Mundus's army of demons. However, he doesn't expect to encounter a mysterious demon knight named Angelo, who recognizes Dante's amulet. Dante has no idea that the person behind this armor is his own brother until the very end when he defeats him. When Angelo disappears, he leaves behind his part of the amulet, confirming that it was indeed Virgil. Then, in the following cutscene, something magical happens. Dante combines the two amulets with the Force Edge, and the sword transforms into its true form, the Devil Sword Sparda. And with that, the sword no longer appears in the story. The library description of the Force Edge in DMC1 simply says, a memento of Dante's father, Sparda. In DMC4, the Force Edge appears again, even though it's no longer being in the story, only existing as Sparda, this time wielded by the playable version of Virgil. Its library says, a devil arm with the power of the legendary Dark Knight Sparda sealed within. It's powerful as is, but its true power has yet to be realized. Then finally, the sword yet again appears in DMC5, but this time it's being a bit more obscure. You can actually see its model being used for Virgil's SDT version of his summoned swords when you fight against him. And then in Virgil's playable version, the Force Edge finally appears one more time, but this time being only a blue, spectral version of the Force Edge. You can say it's the Moonlight Greatsword of Devil May Cry. Perhaps this design serves two things. One is for the player to have an easier time distinguishing Virgil's arsenal from Dante's swords, and secondly, story-wise, it's easier to imagine that the Force Edge is no more, and Virgil only using some sort of a spirit or mirage version of it. Its library description by Nico says, so I guess Virgil can just straight up make a magic sword from thin air now, just swinging his soul around like a blade. If your pups can manage this, maybe you can too? Would you mind, giving it a shot for me? This description is actually super interesting and giving us a lot to theorize on. She calls the blade as his soul. Well, first of all, Virgil has always been capable of summoning magic swords, so this could hint at the idea that all this time he was manifesting these swords out of his soul. Secondly, Nico is encouraging Nero to try doing the same thing, which he can kinda do in his Devil Trigger form. He can also use summoned swords, and use a spectral version of his father's sword, the Yamato, although more on that later. First, we need to move on to the next sword on the timeline, the sword of the legendary Dark Knight, Sparda. The following sword's history begins 2000 years ago, when Sparda rebelled against his own kind for the sake of the human race, and he did so using this sword bearing his own name, the Devil Sword Sparda. This is the true form of the Force Edge. Visually, the Sparda is the most striking. It doesn't even look like a sword, more like a lump of flesh and bones with a blade sticking out on the side. It is a sword that came from the demon world after all. It's also not only looking like a sword, but a sight as well, as it can open up if you perform certain moves. Its handle and hilt looks pretty much the same as on the Force Edge, except the handle in DMC5 appears to be bent a little bit. In DMC1, 2 and 4, the fleshy sword has a big red stone in the middle, which is most likely the two amulets combined within. In DMC4, however, we can get a closer look on the other side of the blade, showing 4 more pieces of dots. I'm not sure what they are supposed to be, but they get even more mysterious in the next game. In Devil May Cry 5, the Sparda gets the most detailed design ever. Its fleshy part has a spine's bone sticking out of it, and the flesh holding the blade now can be seen clearly. Also, the symbol on the hilt now gets evolved, turning into a golden color on top of the silver wings. However, there is one more interesting thing that doesn't really get an explanation. On both sides of the sword, we can see 4 different depressions in the flesh, containing 8 different gemstones overall. We can see 2 red stones on both sides, supposedly representing the 2 sides of the amulet. But there is also 2 little green stones this time, and on top of that, 4 stone pieces appears to be missing, leaving only the depressions behind. And then again, I'm not sure how to interpret this, but it might give you some interesting ideas for the mystery behind these green stones and missing pieces. And overall, the Sparda is a true form of the Force Edge, and when comparing the 2 swords, the only resemblance is the handle and the hilt with demon wings. In my interpretation though, it's almost as if Sparda has 2 sides. The human side manifesting in a sword that looks like humans would wield, while its demon side looks alien and doesn't make sense for humans, something only demons could wield. The Devil Sword Sparda story continues where we left off the story of the Force Edge in the first Devil May Cry. After Dante defeats Nilo Angelo, he obtains the other side of the amulet, and upon combining together with the Force Edge, the blade turns into its true form, the way it looked like when his father was wielding it. Dante continues his journey using this sword, using it to defeat Mundus. However, after that, he goes back to Trish's thought to be dead body, and in an act of mourning, he decides to leave the sword on her side.
My father's also here now. Rest in peace.
However, later he encounters Mundus again, and it turns out Trish is still alive, bringing back the sword with her. She's hiding it somewhere in her pockets. The first library description of the Sparda says it's the true form of the Force Edge, the sword wielded by the legendary Dark Knight, Sparda. The sword continues to appear in Devil May Cry 2 as a weapon for Trish. As it turns out, ever since Dante left the sword behind her side, he decided to let her keep it while they working together in the fight against demons. Trish is an optional playable character in DMC 2 who you can unlock after beating the game on hard difficulty, or use a cheat code like I did. Since Trish doesn't actually get her own story in this game, the story of Sparda doesn't go any further either, and the library description in DMC2 simply says, Sparda, the Dark Knight's beloved sword. And that's it. And that's it for DMC2. Moving on to DMC4, Trish yet again appears as a playable character, still wielding the Sparda. And this time the Sparda actually gets a bigger role in the story. Before the story begins, off-screen, Trish's mission is to infiltrate the Order of the Sword, even using a disguise to hide her identity. And the way she convinced them to join in is by offering the Devil Sword Sparda into Sanctus's hands. In return, Trish earns their trust and manages to get info for Dante to help him fight against Sanctus. However, Sanctus comes back to life as he has been turned into a demon, and at the final boss fight against him, uses the Devil Sword Sparda against us. And after Nero defeats him, the sword finally gets back to Trish's hands, and everything went according to plan. Trish is also an optional playable character in DMC4 Special Edition, wielding the Sparda yet again as her only weapon besides her electricity martial art. The library description in DMC4 says, the sword wielded by Dante and Virgil's father, Sparda. This is the true form of the Force Edge. Then finally, similarly to the Rebellion, the Devil Sword Sparda meets its end in Devil May Cry 5. The story begins with Dante, Trish and Lady entering the Qliphoth together in order to take down Urizen. And once more, Trish is wielding the Sparda on her back. This time we can't play as Trish and we can't see her actually fighting with it, but Urizen appears to be too strong, and neither Trish and Lady, neither Dante, neither Nero is too strong enough to defeat him. and when Dante gets overwhelmed by reason, Trish throws the Sparda into his hands, helping to free himself from the demon's grasp. But despite having both the rebellion and the Sparda in his hands, Dante ends up being thrown out of the Qliphoth together with the two swords, one of them being broken. Dante, Trish and Lady disappears, and the story focuses on Nero and V fighting against the invasion and trying to find the others.
If Urizen defeated him, then I expect he's not much more than Qliphoth pollen by now.
V comes across Cavalier Angelo and Malphas, and overhearing their conversation about the Sparda that they're trying to get their hands on. From that point, V decides to go and try to track down the sword. Later, he manages to do so and finds the sword being stuck in the wall, hiding Dante's presence below it. Interestingly, there are many demons called the Nobodies dancing below the Devil Sword Sparda, worshipping it. I find it kinda interesting how there are certain demons who actually worship Sparda, despite most demons hating him. I wonder what the reason behind it is. Doesn't that mean that the Nobodies are actually good because Sparda was also good? Maybe the Nobody is looking up to Sparda because he rebelled against his own kind. Does that mean that the other demons are actually oppressing the Nobodies? And the idea of rebelling and fighting against them is appealing to them? Anyways, I'm getting a bit sidetracked here. So the Sparda story continues similarly to how the story of the rebellion ended. If you remember, V manages to drag the heavy sword to Dante and wake him up. From that point, Dante continues to fight with the Sparda, but decides to return to their destroyed family home, or maybe just accidentally come across it. There, he stabs himself with the rebellion, activating its hidden power, but in that moment, the Sparda on his back gets absorbed together with the rebellion, creating a new sword, the Devil Sword Dante. And finally, the DMC5 library description for the Sparda, written by Nico, says, "The sword Sparda bears more than the Dark Knight's name. It gives off an ominous, but somehow divine power. I hear the thing is brimming with demonic power, but only a few tough hombres can actually wield the dang thing. I would love to spend more quality time experimenting on this blade, but nah, better not. I would only get chewed out." And for its transformed version, the description of the Devil Sword Dante, she says the following: "A new Devil Sword born from the fusion of the Rebellion and Sparda, the Devil Sword Dante. Looks like Dante is following in his daddy's footsteps, swinging around the demon blade with his own name." I don't know if he used his own power to fuse it with Sparda or if it was the Rebellion's doing. Either way, anyone can see this is one hell of a new weapon. And with that, the Rebellion and Sparda is no more, now being fused together to create Dante. The Devil Sword Dante in its shape looking very similar to the Force Edge with its pointy end, while its demonic texture resembles the Sparda. And at the end of its handle, the red amulet can be seen. In a transformed state, it can also open up, revealing the glowing red demonic energy inside. It is also capable of using sword transformations, which is kind of a similar ability to Virgil's summon swords. I know it doesn't work the same way, I mean both are magic swords floating around somehow. There is one more sword I would like to mention, because it looks very similar to the Force Edge and can be easily confused with it. The very first cover art supermodel, the Alastor. Alastor is a living devil arm, the Thunder Sword and Spirit of Lightning, appearing in the first Devil May Cry. It is found in the beginning of the game inside the Castellan castle, possessing lightning abilities. When Dante finds it, he gets immediately stabbed in the chest with it, and instead of pulling the sword out of himself, he pulls himself out of it. and it becomes his new weapon. Then after the first DMC, it disappears from the story as Dante presumably sold it to someone, which is a shame, because it was a pretty cool sword. The blade's shape is quite similar with its pointy edge and demon wings to the Force Edge, except the wings are noticeably larger, and you can even see some sort of a dragon mouth. You can even see the dragon's eye, nostrils and tongue, and its handle is actually quite similar to the Force Edge, having a spiral shape and skulls at the end. I wonder if there is a lore reason behind this similarity, perhaps linking it to Sparda somehow. In any case, the only library description of the sword says, Alastor gives the possessor lightning speed and aerial capabilities, meaning the sword swings faster than the Force Edge and gives you the aerial rave ability in the Devil Trigger form, which is basically shooting lightning from your hands in the air. And now that we finally covered Dante's Ars and Law swords, we can finally move on to talk about my favorite weapon, the Yamato. And oh boy, there's a lot to talk about it, so buckle up. The Yamato is the main weapon of Virgil, but other than him, Dante, Nero and even Sanctus gets their hands on it in DMC4. The Yamato is a katana.
What does katana mean?
It means Japanese sword.
The handle is wrapped in white and featuring beautiful golden decorations on the hilt as well. Upon taking a closer look in DMC5, you can notice a circle on it, containing 3 circles within that are also consists of 3 circles. The sheet is black, adorned with 2 golden ribbons in DMC3 and 4, which turns dark blue in DMC5. The Yamato is a Japanese sword, translates to Yama sword. You can see how it is written with kanji in the first Devil May Cry. If you would like to type these symbols into a translator, you would have to type Enma Katana and press space to find the kanji. The pronunciation becomes Enmato. The reason why it's Enma and not Yama is because Enma is the Japanese version of the Hindu god of death, Yama. Enma refers to the Japanese version of Yama, the Buddhist god of hell who judges the dead. He is the leader of the 10 kings of hell and is responsible for deciding the fate of souls in the afterlife. Enma is a Japanese and Chinese adaptation of the Hindu god of death, Yama. The wiki says Yama is the Hindu god of death and justice, responsible for the dispensation of law and punishment of sinners in his adobe, Naraka. The etymology of Yama says the word Yama means twin. Yama has a twin sister, Yami, and later came to mean binder. The word also means moral rule of duty, self-control, forbearance, and cessation. I find the twin part very interesting and well suited for Dante and Virgil. To further confirm Yamato's name connection to the god of death, there is a library description about Sparda in Devil May Cry 5. Quote, the Dark Knight Sparda split his power in 3 parts. One blade bore his own name, the second blade named to embody retaliation, the final blade was named to embody a god of death. So what we can also learn from this is how the 3 swords came to existence by Sparda splitting his power into 3 parts. When exactly he did this and why, the game doesn't seem to tell us, but he definitely ended up giving the Yamato into the hands of his other son, Virgil, when he was still a child and lived together with Dante, who got the other sword, the Rebellion. Although I'm not sure if there was a moment when Sparda literally gave the swords into the children's hands, because for the Yamato I can imagine, but for giving the Rebellion, which is twice the size of young Dante, I doubt it would be the case, but who knows, it would have been just funny. So maybe instead of directly giving the swords to the children, he perhaps said they're going to receive the swords once they are old enough to wield them as a memento. Well, technically, Sparda never said a single word in the game's lore, neither in the manga as far as I remember. However, we do get some quite disturbing illustrations of what happened to the child Virgil in 2 of the mangas, one being Visions of V. After Sparda died in an unspecified location at an unspecified time, the defeated Mundus somehow returned from his imprisonment and decided to immediately take revenge on Sparda's family and the whole city of Redgrave by sending an army of demons to kill them. Eva, their mother, didn't survive the attack, and the last thing she did is hiding Dante in a closet, saving his life from the demons. She then tried to find Virgil, but she was unable to. This led to a traumatic event for the young Virgil, who wasn't as lucky as Dante and got stabbed by the demons. In that desperate moment of almost dying, the Yamato somehow magically manifested in his hands, almost as if it was hiding inside of him. Similarly perhaps to how the Yamato could hide inside Nero's arm, I'm not sure, but in any case, the Yamato manifesting helped Virgil to survive and slay the demons. In that moment, many things got wrong inside of him, thinking his mother did not try to save him, and hating Dante for being saved instead. Being unable to process the loss of his family, he decided to leave and hide and survive on his own, with only the sword in his possession, the only thing he needed. What happened to him while growing up remains a mystery, and the first time we see him on the timeline was the moment when he showed up in Fortuna. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here, and let's try focusing on the story of what happens to the Yamato. I've been just trying to explain just how important this sword is for Virgil. The katana then gets carried over into the story of the prequel, DMC3, showing the young and irresponsible Virgil wielding it like an absolute badass. This is the game where the Yamato shines the most, Virgil being shown slicing up demons with it anime style while blood showers over him, and he's so fast with the blade you can't even see the cuts he's making, but already slices them up into pieces, and the blade is so sharp, it takes some time for them to slowly start falling apart.
You're not the one I faced before. But this smell, there are two of them.
And then he sheathes the sword in the most badass poses. But what I love the most is the cold, brutal moments where he stabs Dante or Arkham right through the stomach with the sword, and he just keeps the sword inside their body while talking shit to them, and then even yanks the sword mid-dialogue just to give them more pain. Or when Dante tries to punch Virgil, but he is fast to react and shields himself, and Dante punches right into the blade, and he even starts moving his fingers, and it makes you feel very uncomfortable. You might be asking, can this get even darker? And yes, it can. After obtaining Dante's amulet, Virgil heads into the sacrificial chamber inside the Temenni group, where he cuts his hand with the Yamato in order to undo Sparda's hard work, seeking his sword, the force-edge hidden within the sealed portal. But of course his plan goes wrong.
Why isn't this working?
And Arkham ends up getting his hands on it. And then Arkham's plan goes wrong, when Virgil decides to team up with his brother in order to defeat him. And yet again, we arrived at the saddest moment of the game that I don't want to talk about, because it just makes me feel so emotional. I think so much love and care went into making this game and its cutscenes. I can just feel the soul and passion went into it, and the final scene just hits me every time. In any case, like I thought with the story of the Force-Edge, Virgil ends up being defeated by Dante. Unable to bear the shame of this defeat, he is driven to the edge of the underworld, where the abyss lies below. This story was meant to tell how he ended up becoming Nilo Angelo after all. The last thing he does is leaving a scratch on Dante's palm when he tries to reach to save him. I think Nero scratching Urizen's palm with his sword in DMC5 kind of parallels that moment and giving the scratch back to him, but I digress. So Virgil ends up falling into the underworld, where he immediately encounters Mundus. Taking the fight seriously and knowing it could be his last, he throws the sheath of the Yamato away and charges in to fight him. But of course, he ends up being defeated by the Demon King, and the Yamato actually gets broken into pieces. Maybe Mundus broke the katana first, and that's what broke Virgil's spirit as well. Mundus then breaks his mind, turning him into his soldier, Nilo Angelo. Can you imagine anything more insulting? And that's how the first Devil May Cry story begins, with Dante encountering Nilo Angelo. And you would think the Yamato is not in this game, and indeed, story-wise it's not, but it's actually a skin when you play on Legendary Dark Knight mode, which basically turns you into Sparda. And interestingly, I just learned about this until fairly recently. The game's library tells us that the Yamato was wielded by Sparda himself. The katana then also can turn into the Devil Sword Sparda if you use Devil Trigger, but it doesn't seem to be canon to the story. Maybe the Yamato was wielded by Sparda once, but it can't just transform into the actual sword. But before we move on to how the Yamato is being found and restored during the events of DMC4, let's take a look at the library descriptions we know so far. In the first DMC, it tells us it's the legendary sword wielded by Sparda. It is said that it has the will and the power to divide and wipe out the darkness. This is the very first description of the Yamato, and I find it interesting how it is being referred to as a sword of Sparda specifically, and not Virgil's sword. And it is used for a good purpose. It is used to fight against darkness itself. It's such a vague concept that could be taken quite literally, as the Yamato can indeed cut through anything, even darkness itself, and it can be taken symbolically, as it's capable of fighting evil. And this is actually quite nice, because you would think at first sight that Virgil is a character who is being shown as being dark and evil himself, as even his fighting style is being called the Dark Slayer, but it's quite the opposite. Virgil is actually being the light that fights against the darkness. I believe Virgil being the light symbolized by so many things, such as the golden colors on his gold design, the golden, almost sun-like symbols on the Yamato, him obtaining Beowulf first, the weapon that is actually using the power of light, and also Dark Slayer literally means he is the one slaying darkness. He is the one fighting against darkness. Virgil's entire character design hints at, although he is looking cold, deep inside there is light, and he wants to fight against demons, not to side with them. But then again, I might be getting ahead of myself, and let's just focus on the Yamato. In the third game, the library description says, a memento from Virgil's father. This samurai's sword's blade is said to cut through anything. Then, the story of the Yamato continues in DMC4, and this is where it gets a bit hard to follow what's going on. Story-wise, Virgil doesn't appear during the events of DMC4, and he's presumably laying somewhere in a comatose state. However, the shards of the broken Yamato begins causing trouble. Turns out the Sparda worshipper group in Fortuna, the Order of the Sword, started becoming a bit evil, and they not only experimenting with making artificial demons out of humans and animals, but they also somehow found all the pieces of the Yamato, as well as the fragments of Nico's armor, being either washed ashore by the ocean, or by Agnus finding it in the underworld while experimenting with opening portals. In any case, they somehow found it and trying to piece it together in Agnus's laboratory, which they failed to do so until Nero shows up and awakens the Yamato, making it piece itself together again. The Yamato actually awakens Nero's Devil Trigger as well, and from that point on, Nero is capable of absorbing the sword inside his demonic arm and actually wield it doing Devil Trigger. Dante considers taking the sword away from Nero, but then he sees the connection between him and his brother's sword, and he decides to leave it to him.
Then keep it.
Unfortunately though, Nero ends up losing to Sanctus, and the Yamato ends up in the evil man's hands. Sanctus then uses it to kill Credo, Kyrie's brother. The fully functioning Yamato now being in the wrong hands, Agnus uses it to open a Hellgate. Not for long though, because Dante comes to the rescue, and after he defeats Agnus, he gets the sword back as well. Yes, the Yamato in Dante's hands. It happened for a brief moment in DMC3 already, but in DMC4 you can actually wield the sword with Virgil's moveset as Dante. Then finally, Dante uses the sword to take down Sanctus, and he decides to leave the Yamato in Nero's possession, who hides it within his arm. And since there is overall 3 different characters, Virgil, Dante and Nero using the Yamato in DMC4, we also get 3 different library descriptions of it, which is the following. A katana used by Dante's brother, it is both the key to opening the Hellgates and their very destruction, which refers to the way Dante uses it to cut them in half, which is pretty epic. The next one says, a sword imbued with tremendous magic, it unleashes the latent power within Nero. Then finally Virgil's weapon library says, a memento given to Virgil by his father, this demonic Japanese-style sword is capable of slicing through anything it touches. Then finally, we arrive to the events of DMC5, which begins with Virgil actually returning, tracking down the Yamato, presumably by sensing its presence, and gently taking it from Nero.
I'm taking this back. I'm running out of time.
I find it quite ambiguous how Virgil says, I'm running out of time, while he is coughing and limping, and his skin is falling apart. It makes me theorize that Virgil actually has no choice but to perform the dividing ritual on himself in order to save his body from being completely falling apart and dying. In any case, he opens a small portal with the Yamato in order to escape, and goes back to his destroyed family home in Redgrave City. Virgil enters the abandoned family house and turns against the painting of his family portrait. He then turns the blade against himself and commits seppuku. And I'm not saying it out of dark humor. What he is doing is very similar to a samurai returning home after a failed battle and doing this in order to restore their honor. Similarly, in the case of Virgil, he lost the battle against Mundus and he wants to restore his honor. He feels like he brought shame to the Sparda family. This ritual activates the Yamato's hidden power to divide his human and demon side. He is doing it with the intent to get rid of his entire human soul, together with all his traumatic memories and all of his human emotions, in order to become a complete demon that he always wanted to be. Being unaware of the tragic consequences of what happens after his body turns into the demon being named as Urizen. But luckily, his human soul decides to fight for his life. As it turns out, his body is so weak, it's actually falling apart without Urizen, so he realizes he has no choice but to take him down and merge together with him again, or he dies. His nightmares and shadow, including Griffon, shares the same sentiment and decides to team up with him. Meanwhile, during these events, the Yamato resides within the red crystal that defends Urizen, which then gets absorbed into his arms. Then finally, when Urizen being brought down to his knees by the help of Dante, and V being brought to the scene by the help of Nero, all four characters beautifully coming together. Demon beats demon, human helps human, demon and human blood yet again fuses together. And finally, the best thing ever in gaming history happens as Virgil is being reborn, together with the Yamato in hand. And his story ends up with being stuck in the underworld with Dante, just like in the Divine Comedy. And I refuse to believe this is how it ends, they gotta get out. And finally, I can't forget about the library description of the Yamato in DMC5, which says from Nico's perspective, a powerful blade that can separate man from demon. Word has it that this was a memento left to Virgil by his daddy Sparda, and it serves as a source of his powers. This thing probably what let Virgil split P off from the rest of himself. As a weapon, it's basically your standard katana, only this one is magic and has an edge sharp enough to cut through space itself. Too bad I only ever got to see it when it was serving as your arm. Really wish you'd let me take a closer look back then, you know. It seems like the Yamato, however, did not remain completely in Virgil's hands. Remember how in DMC4, when Nero enters Devil Trigger, he also fights with some sort of a spectral version of the Yamato, as his mirror image demon form on his back wields it. And in DMC5, you can also see something similar happening. It is not being shown in the cutscenes and not being talked about in the library either, but after you beat the game and enter Devil Trigger with Nero, when performing certain moves like Shodan, or when using Buster, he actually manifests a purple, some sort of a mirage version of the Yamato, as if he can still summon its spirit and energy. But like any other swords, I'm not sure if this is supposed to be part of the story or simply serves a gameplay function. We can't finish this video without one more weapon, Nero's only sword, the Red Queen. This is the first sword on the list that is not a demonic weapon, but actually a human-made one. In its appearance, in my view, it's like the combination of a great sword, like the Rebellion, and a single-bladed sword, like the Yamato, creating this giant katana-shaped weapon. I always say Nero kinda looks like and acts like as if he was a combination of Dante and Virgil, and even his weapons adds to that theme, the Red Queen and his gun, the Blue Rose. However, the most unique feature of the Red Queen is the engine that had been added to its blade, which you can rev up like a motorcycle's engine in order to fire it up and give it a speed boost. As for story, there is not much to say about this sword, except it is important to point out that it was originally created and produced by the Order of the Sword in order to help all its knights to fight against the demons. Nero in the first cutscene and his fight with Dante actually uses one of these basic version of the sword that the others like Credo using as well. And then after Dante is gone, Kyrie brings in a modified version of this type of sword, but it's Nero's own customized version with a bigger engine added. Later, you can also see the Bianco Angelo enemies also using this type of sword with the engine added to the hilt, and you can see them charging it up before attacking you. This is a key information to the story, as it turns out the Order of the Sword were not only making weapons for its knights and Nero, but they also managed to create artificial demons like these souls trapped inside an armor, among the other weird demons. I find this part of the story the most unique about DMC4, how this time it's showing humans creating demons and artificial weaponry, adding an interesting twist on the story about demons always having the upper hand and creating the cool weapons, this time showing that humans are also capable of creating powerful weapons and even their own version of demons. The Red Queen stays Nero's loyal weapon from the beginning in DMC4 to the end of DMC5. And the library descriptions in both games says the following: a mechanical sword with a powerful fuel injection system. A propellant sprayed onto the blade allows it to unleash attacks of great power. However, the Red Queen's complex customizations mean only Nero is capable of controlling it. This last part implies that simple humans cannot even hold the Red Queen because of its powerful kicks, hinting at the fact that Nero is more than human, possessing demonic powers inside of him, allowing him to wield such a crazy, customized weapon. And finally, the library description of the Red Queen in DMC5, written by Nico as if she was talking towards Nero. It says the following: sticking a combustion engine on a sword to add some oomph to its blows. Pretty slick idea. Seems like Daddy drew up the base design. You took the design and souped it up to make this here Red Queen. I gotta tell you, I couldn't help but laugh at the first time I saw it. No one in their right mind would dream up a rig like this. Without demon blood in your veins, dang things go flying out of your hand instead of into some bad guy. So yet again, even Nico points out here how you need a demon's power in order to wield this sword, even though, like I said, this is the first weapon that was created by humans but got modified by Nero, because he just figured out that he is stronger than the other humans somehow. The part where Nico says that he drew up the base design, she refers to Agnus, the evil scientist from DMC4, who turned out to be her father. It is not surprising, given he was a member of the Order of the Sword, doing a lot of research on demons, and invented many weapons and weird creatures beside the base design for the Red Queen. And that's the end of all my knowledge and research on the main swords of the main characters in every Devil May Cry. This script took a long time to write, but it was a lot of fun, especially because I shared my progress on my Discord and we had some mind-blowing discussions about the sword lore with some members, like Nero the Sky, who helped me a lot in figuring out the true meaning of the Yamato's name, and he also helped me to provide footage from DMC1 about the Yamato that is actually quite hard to unlock, so thank you. This community is honestly amazing and I'm happy to try and add more DMC content for you to enjoy. I might have been wrong about a couple of stuff, but let me know in the comments if that's the case, and let me know your thoughts and interpretations. And as always, thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Take care.